Hey everyone, we have a new Star Wars director, and it's an old Star Wars director. I'm Jim Vejvoda, this is Joshua Yale, and we're going to talk about J.J. Abrams coming back to direct Star Wars Episode 9. He is replacing Colin Trevorrow, who is out. And you know what? Surprise, surprise, this is a divisive kind of response that people are having to it online, and even here at IGN. Our own Scott Kalura in New York has some very passionate and I would say negative thoughts on JJ coming back to direct this. Now let's talk about, let's react here to JJ coming aboard. Now, Star Wars began as one filmmaker's vision. Okay, for better or for worse, George Lucas's hand was the guiding force behind all of it. But he was an independent filmmaker, and Star Wars, for 6 movies, was an independent filmmaker's vision and execution. And of course, then he sold to Disney, and now it's corporate IP. So, corporate IP being corporate IP, you're not exactly going to play, you're not going to get risky with a billion-dollar franchise. JJ seems to be the safest choice possible for doing this. What do you think? Do you think he is the safe choice, and does that concern you at all for like Star Wars and what it could be and what that kind of means for the franchise?
Well, yeah, the fact that Star Wars is corporate, that's nothing new. That happened even when George Lucas was around. But you kind of, when you envision these Star Wars movies being made, you do think of this like shadowy corporate council headed up by Kathleen Kennedy, just trying to deciding how it's all gonna happen, and it needs to fit a particular vision. But hey, J.J. Abrams essentially, he stuck to the house style of Star Wars and created a new style that they're doing for this trilogy. So I think the fact that you're getting him back, it's at the very worst, you're guaranteeing you're getting a movie that's at least as good as Force Awakens. And while it did rehash some things, but it had new characters, new mysteries, and I thought it did what it needed to do to reignite the franchise and get people excited for what's coming. So yeah, it is safe, but I think I feel strangely excited that we're gonna have a safe win for Star Wars for Episode 9.
I mean, I can't find, I don't find the news of JJ coming aboard Episode 9 to be surprising in the least. I figured, as you and I had recently chatted about, it was down to him or Rian Johnson, the director of Last Jedi. And it's, you know, there's been too much director drama on the other ones, right down to Colin Trevorrow on this film, that they have a release date to make, and they have a franchise that they have to close out here, this trilogy. So she's going to rely on people that she can trust. And even though there was some drama with Force Awakens, they did have Michael Arndt wrote a whole script that they had to toss out and start over. So JJ's been down this path before. Colin Trevorrow couldn't crack that script for Episode 9. They tried and they tried, and she wasn't agreeing, Kathleen Kennedy wasn't agreeing with his vision, and the buck stops with her. You know, she's in charge. So the fact that they would go back to somebody they can trust, yes, it's a safe choice, but when you're playing with a billion-dollar franchise, I get why that happens. I think the larger question is, and one that, you know, the divisive response speaks to, is creatively, are we just going to get a rehash of what's come before? And that was one of the big criticisms leveled at Force Awakens, was that it was sort of just retreading A New Hope. And then even, you know, JJ has faced this when he did the Star Trek franchise, particularly Star Trek Into Darkness, the sequel, which, you know, spoiler, but they bring back Khan, and they did like a lot of retreading fan service, but trying to invert it, and it just, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, didn't work.
Yeah, for Into Darkness especially, it was like corrupted fan service, as they did all these things where they thought it was gonna go over really well, but real diehard Trekkie fans and just the kind of general audience weren't that into it. Even though if you go look at the reviews, they're actually pretty high for the movie. But
I think it was that mystery box part of it too.
Yeah, and I think what J.J. Abrams came out after movies and said, what he said was that it was a bad idea to handle it like that. So he's learned his lesson. Hopefully, right? So the one time where he's done a sequel to, you know, big franchise movie, Star Trek Into Darkness, hopefully he'll have learned his lesson on Force Awakens, where I'm sure he will play it safe, in some regard, but maybe he won't be as beholden to doing that again. I think he will be empowered to take a couple of chances, and he'll be rewarded for that by the fandom, because the last thing we want is a rehash of like Return of the Jedi, right? The original threequel. So I don't think he'll be doing that again. I think people will be getting some like things that are familiar and hit familiar tones of like, but maybe playing more to themes of Star Wars, more to specific plot threads. Because if they do another Starkiller base at the end,
but it's like only half built.
Yes, it's only half built. Then we can all be angry at JJ. But I think right now he's earned our good trust.
Yeah, I mean, look, if anything, if there's one thing we can be certain about of a J.J. Abrams directed Episode 9 is it's going to make $1 billion. That thing is going to clean up. So I'm curious to see what he does with it. I hope that Rian Johnson is leaving him some interesting narrative threads that he's going to have to deal with that maybe he didn't even anticipate. So it's going to be curious.
That's actually what's most interesting about this, because JJ is known for starting these crazy mysteries like he did with Lost, and handing them off to other people and let them finish out and tell people what's in the mystery box and make it satisfying. But he started the question of who are Rey's parents, and how did Kylo Ren become corrupted by Snoke and fall to the dark side. He didn't have answers. It's come out that they don't have a big whiteboard where they drew out the answers and listed how these things play out. So Rian Johnson is picking that up, dealing with some of that, but then handing it back to JJ and saying, you finish it. So this is actually really cool. I'm into seeing that happen. I'm interested to see one person pick the reins back up, especially if it's JJ.
I do want to point out one other bit of this official news, which is JJ will be co-writing the script for Episode 9 with Chris Terrio, who won an Oscar for Argo and is also credited writer on Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and on Justice League, but his version, as we all know, is being retooled by Joss Whedon. So, curious there what kind of story they're going to cook up. Well, that's what we think about J.J. Abrams coming back to direct Star Wars Episode 9. We want to hear what you have to say about it, though, so let us know in the comments. Also, check out our great video feature on every Jedi ever, and then the Up at Noon guys. They have some burning questions about Star Wars: The Last Jedi. You should check that out as well. And as always, be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you like to watch IGN.